Hello and welcome to my channel Excel for Newbies. I am Professor Avesh Bornia. Welcome back to the world of Microsoft Excel and analytics. I have used the word analytics after quite some time now because we will be diving deep into analytics using MS Excel in the further videos. In the last video, we discussed the if function with two other logical functions and or. In this video, we will be extending our concept of the if function and will work with multiple if statements in one formula to evaluate multiple conditions. Let me explain the concept of nested if. Nested if means a single if statement within another if statement. Now these if statements are not limited just to two statements. A nested if statement can contain up to 7 if statements. However, there are alternatives to the nested if statements, which I promise to cover in the upcoming videos. If you would like to follow along with me, please download the file in the link given below. In this video, we will be creating a mark sheet and assigning grades to the students based on their scores. And this is what is going to be created by us in this video. Now, before we jump into the Excel environment, I would like to give you a few tips on how to use the nested if statements. Now, I have been using the word nested constantly. What does nested basically mean? Nested means one within another. So it means nested or nesting one function within another function, wherein the result of one function becomes the input for another function. In the upcoming videos, we will be looking at a lot of other nested functions wherein we'll be talking about index match, we will be talking about VLOOKUP and the match combination. Right now, let us focus on the if statement. There are a few tips that you should keep in mind. The first, the number of conditions define the number of if statements that will be used in the formula. Assuming you have n conditions, then the number of if statements used will be n minus 1. There will be only one equal to sign in the formula irrespective of the number of if statements. I may have one if statement, I may have two, I may have n number of if statements, a maximum of 7, or else any other formula where I use two different functions together. Even then I will have only a single equal to sign. Keep this in mind because this is one of the fundamental concepts of working with formulas in Excel. The first if statement will have a true value and the false value will be another if statement, except the last if statement, which will have both a true and false values. These points or these tips will be clarified once we jump into the Excel environment, and that's where we will be understanding what exactly this entire tips mean or these points mean. Now let us look at the construction of a nested if statement. The construction of a nested if statement is done in this manner. So you start with the first if statement. Here my first if statement says the score being less than 50. So I am checking the condition whether it is less than 50. And if the statement is true, then it will show up as false. It will show up as fail. If this particular condition is not fulfilled, that is, if the value is not less than 50, then the value will be false and that value will not be displayed. Instead, the second argument will be put in, wherein you will check again if the score is less than 75. And that will go into the second logical condition or the second if statement, which will be checked against a value of 75, where the score will be again checked against a value of 75. So if this value, if the score is greater than 75, then the value returned will be distinction. If the value is not greater than 75, then the value will be returned as pass. So the entire loop or the entire if statement functions in this way. I will quickly reiterate it. The first statement will check if the score is less than 50, and if it is so, it will return the value fail. If it is not, it will move to the second if statement. The second if statement will actually be the false value for the first if statement. I know this sounds a little confusing, but once we actually go and work in the Excel environment, things will be clarified. The second if statement will be checking the same score against a value of 75. If the value is greater than 75, the value returned will be distinction. If not, the value will be pass. Effectively, if the value is between 50 and 75, the value returned will be pass. As I mentioned in the beginning of the video, this is exactly what we are looking at. So I am going to teach you in this video how to work with 2 conditions and how to work with 5 conditions also. So basically we're going to be looking at the grading of the scores of students. So here we are essentially working with not 2 but 3 conditions. If you look at the conditions are, if the score is less than 50, the student should fail. If the score is between 50 and 74, the student should pass. And if the score is above 74, the student should get distinction. And if you notice, there are all 3 different conditions for the scores that are there. I have on purpose put those scores. Well, now I'm going to take you through creating this formula, and this formula has been, I have extracted this formula using the formula text function, which I have done in the past as well. You can refer to my other videos as to how to work with the formula text function. Well, now we go to the start sheet for the same 2 conditions, and we will construct the formula right from the beginning. If you remember in the last video, we constructed the if statement using the formula builder. But here I'm not going to be using the formula builder, because when you're working with nested if statements, the formula builder is not a very good idea to work with. So what I'm going to do is, again, another tip while working with long formulas, try and construct your formula here in the formula bar rather than typing it out here. The reason being, they're both going to replicate each other, but your focus will be on the formula bar, and accommodating larger and longer formulas will be easy for you. So let's start with the equal to sign and the if statement. Now the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to be testing this particular score against 50. So if the value is less than 50, the value should be fail. Now you will notice I am putting everything in double quotes because I'm working with strings. What should happen if the value is greater than 50? Then again there will be an if statement. Now pay attention here. I am not putting an equal to sign, the first point that I mentioned. And I am going to be constructing the second if statement with the same value. I'm going to be testing the same value against 75, where I'm going to be checking if this value is greater than 75, then the student should be given a distinction grade, or else the student should be passing with a pass grade. Now you will notice that the moment I have created the second if statement, here the first if statement has got a true value and another if statement for its false value, whereas the second if statement has got a true value and a false value. So that is what I meant in the tips that I was giving you. So I've covered all the 3 tips. The first is talking about the number of if statements. So here the conditions are 3, hence the number of if statements used will be 3 minus 1, which will be 2. Point number 2 was there will be a single equal to sign irrespective of how many ever if statements I am going to be using in my formula. And 3, the first if statement or all the if statements barring the last if statement will have a value for true, but will have another if statement for the false, which is true in this case. Now, another tip that I want to give you, it's a little humorous to remember this. In fact, when I discuss this in my workshops, I do keep telling this. The key to remembering how many brackets to close is the number of brackets that have been opened should be equal to the number of brackets that have been closed. Otherwise, the secret will be let out. Well, that's what is the technique that you should remember. And here, another important way of recognizing the number of brackets being closed is every time I close a bracket, let me show that to you again. Every time I close a bracket, its corresponding open bracket will be emphasized on in the same color. And till you do not encounter a black bracket, you keep closing the brackets. Well, that's how you create it. And I have got my value, which is fail. Let me drag the formula down to check if it's working for all the other values as well. And voila, it does work for it. You've got 24 fail, 79 distinction, 92 distinction, 74 that's at the border, that's a pass. Well, that's about working with 3 conditions. Now I'm going to show you how to work with 5 conditions, wherein we've got to give 5 different grades to our participants of the course. Now let me show you what I'm basically talking about first, and then I will move to the construction. Well, the formula on top looks really lengthy, but don't worry, we're going to be working with it step by step, and we're going to be going through it one by one. So let's look at the conditions first, and then let's start constructing the formula. So the number of conditions are 5, wherein we are checking anything less than 35 is fail, anything less than 50 is pass, anything less than 60 is second class, anything less than 75 is first class, anything less than 100 is distinction. Essentially, this means anything between 0 to 34 is fail, 35 to 49 pass, so on and so forth. So you have 5 conditions, and based on those 5 conditions, the number of if statements that you will require will be 4 if statements. And that is what you see in the formula mentioned above in the yellow. You've got 4 different if statements to take care of those 5 conditions of yours. And you will notice that all these if statements, except for the last if statement, has got the true value but has another if statement for the false value. And this is a true example of a nested if statement, wherein you're looking at 5 different conditions and 4 different if statements. Well, this is what we are going to be creating. So let's look at it and let's create it from the scratch. So let's get into the start 5 conditions worksheet. So let's get on to the task at hand. Remember, work within the formula bar when you're creating long formulas. In fact, it's a good practice to work within the formula bar. It gives you more space to work, and you're not troubled by the constant tooltips that keep coming up or the constant screen tips that keep coming up. So you start with the equal to sign, and then you put in the first if statement. Now here, I'm going to be creating this formula in a little different way, wherein I'm not using strings, but I'm going to be using cell references and revisit the formula creation using absolute and relative cell references in the past videos if you have any doubts with what I'm going to be doing, because I'm not going to be explaining you what I'm doing, but I'm just going to be giving you a gist of what's happening at the referencing perspective or from the referencing perspective. So first you select the score of the participant. Now remember, this formula is going to be dragged down. In fact, it's going to be filled down. So if it's filled to the right, the formula may change. So it's better that you lock the column. Now in order to lock the column, you need to press the F4 key thrice, and you will get the $sign just before the column. And that is called as mixed cell referencing. That's fixing the column. So whatever has the $sign is going to be fixed. So if it's having a $sign before the column name and the row number, then the entire cell is fixed. So that's what we're going to be doing for the conditions and the values for each of those conditions. Now, if you're going to be checking it against the first condition, which is less than 35. So you put a less than symbol and less than 35, wherein you lock this value. The reason is because when you drag the formula anywhere to the right, or you fill it down, or you fill it to the right, you are going to be experiencing the values changing. So it will change from D7 to D8, or from D7 to E7, which we do not want. So we want that value to be fixed. We want it to always compare the value first with 35. Now if this is true, then it should be displaying the text fail. Now again, you're going to be locking this. Now I'm going to do this a little quickly. That's the first if statement. You put the comma and then you start with the second if statement. You check the same value, you lock it thrice. To lock at the column level, you compare it to the second value, which is 50. You lock it and then you give it pass. That's in E8. Again, put the if statement. You check the same value, you lock it at the column level. You compare it with the third value, that is 60. You lock 60 and you give it the grade. You put in the next if statement. Now notice there are already 3 if statements that have been created. So you have to be careful with the last one, because the construction of the last one is key, since you have got to create only 4 if statements. So let's see how the last one is created. You put the if statement, you select your score, you lock it at the column level, you compare it with the value that needs to be compared, and then you put the value if true as first class. You lock it here. Now let me pause again. Let's revisit the third tip that I gave you in the beginning of the video. All if statements barring the last if statement will have a true value but will not have a false value. Instead, they will have an if statement for the false value. Now since this is the last if statement, what will be the value for the false condition? And the last value will be this cell, which is distinction only. So you have put the value 100, but that's just a dummy value. That is just for your reference. You are not going to be using this anywhere in your formula. You are just going to be using the grade, that is distinction. So let me select distinction, that's in E11, and lock it. Now here again, if you do not close the number of brackets that were open, the secret would be let out. So let's keep the secret intact by closing it. That's the first, that's the second, that's the third, and that's the fourth bracket. Again, till you do not encounter the black bracket, keep closing your brackets. And let's check if our formula is right. Well, the first value is absolutely right, because 24 is a score that is less than 35 and it has given us the grade fail. But let's check it with the second value, whether it's working, and there it is working. So let's drag it down to the third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth, and the 10th value. And there you go. Let's randomly check it. So 74 is a first class, 77 is a distinction, 92 is a distinction. And there we have constructed a massive nested if formula, which is key to working with evaluating number of conditions greater than 1. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I hope you learned how to work with evaluating multiple conditions. Looking forward to see you in the next video with the VLOOKUP statement and how to work with larger data sets and create and analyze data which will be helpful both from the business perspective and which will be instrumental in delivering results. Well, if you like the content that I'm sharing, if you are enjoying it, if you're learning from it, please subscribe to this channel and share it with your colleagues, with your friends, all the learners who want to learn Excel. Thanks for watching this video. Thanks for subscribing. Hit the bell icon for subscribing to this channel so that you don't miss any important update from this channel. Thank you.